Hi, this is Paul. Wanted to show you a few media clips, social media clips, in intro of a much bigger conversation about where things seem to be heading in our cultural context and this moment in which we are. So these are maybe a little goofy, inflammatory, clickbaity type things, but I'm not trying to use them for clickbait or to create outrage or something like that. There's more than enough of that to go around. It's not really the point, as I think you will see. But I do want to show something that I think is reflective of what's going on right now, and then trace that into some deeper thoughts about where that may be coming from, where some of this may be coming from. So the first one, and try again.
Do you have a message to straight white conservative men?
They can go themselves, actually.
Can I hear your best liberal scream?
It's from my gut, yeah.
Come on. Do you have a...
Okay, sorry, I should have warned you about the screaming. This one I won't show you a video. It's just the article and description, basically. This is from The Guardian, and it is a little profile piece of a rapper, this or maybe pop star. I'm not even sure. I don't know this person. She made her name in Mean Girls and Sex Life of College Girls, which I think is a Broadway play. But it's her lack of a filter off screen that sent her viral. Ahead of her new album, she talks fame, gossip, and Trump's America. Doesn't hold back. The quote from the article is, "I've never asked for the approval of conservative white bigots." Renee Rapp on her pop stardom problem fans and speaking her mind. Okay, and I won't go into more context on that. You can just kind of take it for what it is. Here's just a quick reel from social media. Some sort of talk show or podcast. Sorry.
It's like you need to earn your place out here. Every guy should start in jail and have to work his way out.
Absolutely.
I think
love
that's
that idea.
Because it's like you need to earn your place out here.
You do.
In my opinion.
You do. And it should be treated as if they're on probation for a while. Like one strike, you're back.
Yeah, even when they're out. Yeah, you're right. Every guy should start.
All right, so maybe a little tongue-in-cheek there, but what they're saying is men should have to just begin life in jail and then earn their way out of that situation. Yeah, so you probably see a thread running through all these, and these are silly examples in and of themselves. And if I thought it was not part of something somewhat bigger, there would be no point in me including this in a video or perpetuating these things beyond their original existence. But my opinion is, and I hope to unpack this with you, my opinion is things like this, not necessarily the duck thing maybe, but kind of, are just increasing in number, in frequency, in what proportion of the population some of the thought behind these things seems to be capturing. And I do think that there's a reason for that. I think that comes from somewhere and has some pretty big implications. I do want to show you an article that I think would be a good segue into just, a little bit deeper than just these little videos and articles that are just sort of blips of data. This is a New York Times Magazine article. And I've seen a lot more articles like this in mainstream publications. This is the New York Times Magazine, so I would think that's pretty mainstream. Things like The Economist, Guardian, Atlantic, New York Times, just mainstream, what's considered pretty good journalism, generally speaking, these sources. But it's the trouble with wanting men. Women are so fed up with dating men that the phenomenon even has a name: heterofatalism. Fatalism as in death. So what do we do with our desire? And I'm going to read just a little bit of this. I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's quite long, and some of it is rated PG-13 or above, which I don't really want to read. It's also instructive, but I just don't want to read it. But it starts off, "The stranger arrived at the bar before I did." This is a female author. As I intended him to, and was waiting me at a table in the back, he had the kind of face I like and had been a little difficult to pin down, delayed in his responses, which I also like. The place was loud with the having fun sounds people make when they expect to have fun any minute now, so we were leaning in to hear each other. His hair I thought would be good to put my hands in. And then she goes on talking about the situation they're in a restaurant. He was a little shy back at her place. She really wanted him to want her. And then he says, I really was looking forward to seeing you again. He had texted the following week around lunchtime, but I'm going through some intense anxiety today and need to lay low. I totally understand, I replied, but I didn't. Feeble, fallible, looking forward is not longing. A man should want me urgently or not at all. And then I'll skip what comes next for rating purposes. And then she's there with her female friends. Of course he has anxiety, said one of them, a therapist who sat across from me at the restaurant. That's life. That's being alive and going to meet someone you don't know well. And then the other women chime in with basically critiques and criticisms. And mutual complaints about men for similar reasons. Oh, poor baby, cried the historian, and we all cooed and moaned for the poor little fraidy cat boo-boo, working ourselves up into a frenzy of laughter. And then I'll skip a little bit here. And then they just generally go into a making fun of men mode for basic anatomical reasons and broadly across the spectrum of all of mankind. When did the men get so anxious about desire, asked the therapist, and I said I didn't know. Yes, you do, my friend said. It was when they were put on notice that they can't just get drunk and grope us. And then the author goes on, I haven't been dating long. Just the other day, my ex-husband and I received our judgment of divorce as an email attachment, but long enough to discover I have a type. He is gentle, goofy, self-deprecating, deferential, a passionate humanist, a sweet guy, a good guy. He tends to signal in various ways his exemption from the tainted category of men, and it is perfectly understandable that he would wish to do so. It must be mildly embarrassing to be a straight man, and it is incumbent upon each of them to mitigate this embarrassment in a way that feels authentic to him. One of the reasons my marriage ended was that I fell in love with another man, whom I'll refer by his first initial J. And then she describes J and how she came to be with him. Her husband my husband and I, quoting again, had an open relationship at the time that Jay and I met. So the terms of our involvement were at first limited. And she goes on to explain a little more about how she came to be with Jay and left her husband, even though they were in an open marriage. It seems to me, surveying the field as a dating novice, that this kind of studiously irreproachable male helplessness abounds. I keep encountering and hearing about men who can't. Maybe my friend was right about male anxiety at this moment. Maybe the men are taking a beat, laying low, unsure of how to want, how to talk, how to woo. Maybe they're punishing us for the confusion. There are many routes to the species of disappointment I'm circling here, but however we get here, the complaint is so common, such a cultural and narrative staple, that the Academy is weighing in. We now have a fancy word, heteropessimism, to describe the outlook of straight women fed up with the mating behavior of men, coined by the sexuality scholar Asa Saracen, who later amended it to heterofatalism. The term seems at first glance to distill a mood that is no less timely for being timeless. And then there's a little bit more of situational anecdote stuff from other friends. And the woman is complaining about, where she ended up in this relationship, and she resented the fact that she was wanting him to call and he wasn't calling. Sort of a traditional frustration, traditional male-female type of scenario. And then you got this artwork within the article, which I think is good because it in a sense that it captures the tone, the emotion, I think, of the article, what the tenor is. And, you've got the man here who kind of looks like what the author described, sort of a non-threatening, non-super aggressive, non-alpha, if you want to use that kind of language, male. He doesn't look very confident or impressive or whatever. And then you have the woman who is just in all sorts of varieties of contempt and disgust and boredom and whatever, but certainly all negative emotions and fed up, contemptuous. I'm really done, my friend said. I can't keep doing this. I don't want to be hurt and misunderstood constantly. I need to find some other way to live. I agreed without thinking about it. This is part of the pessimism, right? The feeling that further thinking about all this is futile. Surely we have done enough thinking by now. I wish I could just be gay with you, she said, and I wished I could that too, so much. This was our commiserative routine, what Saracen might call our performative disaffiliation with heterosexuality. Our spin on take my wife, please. Take my straightness, please. Take my attraction to men. Okay, and then she goes on from there. I'll pause there on the reading of the article, but it's enough to give you a sense. And there's so much here that just drags up all kinds of thoughts and reflections and observations. And the reason I'm reading it is, again, not because this one article is so important, but because I've seen so much of this and what it represents. And if you go to the comments, I don't know, it's a little depressing. It's also instructive in some ways. If you're like me, anyway, I'm like kind of endlessly fascinated with things like this and what seems to be underneath this. But one of the observations is just what has become normal to say and do. And here I'm including in this the initial videos and articles that I showed just as little anecdotes, little data points. What's considered acceptable and okay to do, say, and think out loud in public has really, I think, shifted in this arena and in a way that's interesting. There is a term that I think is helpful with something like this called the Overton Window. And I'm going to bring it up and show it to you if I can. So this is the Overton Window. And the idea is, at any given point in time, you have things that are considered acceptable in a group or society in general. So I'm just going to say society in general. And, what might be acceptable now was outside the window of acceptability before, maybe 5 years before, 50 years before, whatever. And so there's a range, there's like mainstream, then there's kind of the fringe of that, then there's what's out of bounds, it's unacceptable, and unthinkable here. Radical would be the kind of adjectives they use for the out of bounds and this particular graphic. And where the Overton window is shifting. It is really, really shifting. So I don't know that even 10 or maybe 20 years ago, you could just straight up be openly contemptuous of just white people or conservatives as an entire block, or all men, like 50% of the population. But you can now. You can do that, and you'll find plenty of support. You can publish it in a major publication, and it's very interesting because in this article you have obviously women just kind of pummeling men as a class and expressing their frustration. I would certainly say contempt and in some cases what seems like disgust or dismissiveness. I don't think you can do that with women. I don't think you can publish that. And in fact, there's the terms for this, just to keep talking about terms, I guess, there's many terms that describe this sort of whole-scale dismissal or contempt for women. And it's, the word that gets used is misogyny or toxic masculinity. We have terms for them. And it's interesting that there is no term, at least not the one that gets used, for toxic femininity. And there's you could have a whole conversation about that, but that's just a basic observation. There isn't a term. So it's a lot more easy. It's a lot easier to talk about harmful attitudes of men against women than it is to talk about harmful attitudes of women against men. in fact, there's the toxic femininity, there's the lack of that term. And then the misogyny, you can think, well, what's the opposite of misogyny? What's the parallel to misogyny? And the word is misandry. I don't even know if I'm saying it right because no one says it or writes it almost ever. In fact, I just researched how much do these things get used? And I don't know how to analyze how much they get used, but I know the ratio seems to be like 1,000 to 1 or something like that. Here's just Google searches in the last 5 years for misogyny blue versus misandry red, and it's kind of what you would expect. It's one just completely dwarfs the other. There's even studies on these things, and so here's a little interesting graph of the studies that people have conducted about online misogyny versus online misandry. And the misogyny is pink and the misandry is blue. And so, studying misandry just doesn't really exist, essentially. And I had one more. Yeah, I can't remember exactly the context of this, but it's the same sort of thing. Pink is misogyny and blue is misandry. And this actually came from a study. This was the beginning of a study where they looked at Reddit threads and the relative prevalence of misogyny versus misandry for threads that could contain them but didn't have to contain them, like feminism or something like that. And in their study, they weren't exactly the same, but they did a couple on the potential misogyny side and a couple on the potential misandry side. And there was just a lot of overlap. There was a lot of similarity. They weren't exactly the same, of course, but it wasn't like 100 to 1 kind of ratio or 10 to 1 or anything like that. But why the language differential? Why if something was published like this article that I just read you excerpts from, that was just the roles were reversed, I think it would very clearly and as a consensus or almost universal be condemned as misogyny. Just a bunch of men sitting around and just lambasting women as a class and talking about how lame they all are, and there's just no hope because the women are so bad. And maybe that's the case. I'm not saying these people didn't have this horrible experience. All I'm pointing out is the incredible asymmetry, and not for the purpose of outrage, and not for the purpose of, oh, woe is men or something like that. I don't feel that way, and that isn't what this is about. But this is important, and there are things behind this and underneath this, and it tends to guide people and culture, society, in a particular direction that has major consequences. Like, it's very serious. In so many ways, I can't even start talking about it because it'll be, a super deep rabbit hole. But if you're still watching this, you're probably at least interested enough to maybe agree with, like, hey, that's probably going to be important. And so here's another article that I'm just using as an example. There are countless posts and articles like this. I'm sorry, it's not an article, it's a post. There is a moment in the day, maybe 5 minutes long, when a mother sees clearly that this giving has cost her something permanent. I was taken by this quote because, honestly, a little naive. I thought where it was going was somewhere completely different. I thought I was going to say there's a moment 5 minutes long when a mother sees clearly, and it was something about the value of her motherhood or the worth of her sacrifices or something like that, the infinite lasting of what she's building and doing. But obviously it's not. It's the opposite of that. This has cost us something permanent. And then, if you read the comments, there's definitely a split in terms of people's sentiments, but there is no shortage of people, and I think most of them are people. Who knows? Some of them could be bots. I will definitely grant that. But there is no shortage of people who are very serious about, the unfair, not right cost of motherhood. And there was one or two I was hoping to find here. Somebody says life itself costs you something permanent, yeah, that's true. Okay, I can't find it, but there was plenty of comments that even when people spoke up and said, this isn't really my experience, this is not how I look at motherhood or how I feel about it, those people were attacked. And it's very similar to a video I made recently about a post that was similarly addressed towards women. And the women who disagreed with somehow the overall very negative sentiment expressed in the post about men, the people who disagreed or said it wasn't their experience were very consistently attacked as collaborators with the enemy, collaborators with the perpetrators. And that's important. That dynamic is as important as the fact that somebody's posting this and has a ton of support. That dynamic is important. And so the comments were even very clear, some of them, that motherhood itself is immoral and a function of the patriarchy. And people who are lauding it and touting its benefits and worthiness are puppets. The women who do that are puppets of the patriarchy. And so you can see kind of the dynamics at work. It's similar to what I've talked about in a previous video, where there is a very strong posturing and argument being made for one very powerfully explanatory point of view. And that any disagreement with that is again, collaborating with the oppressors, with the enemy, with the perpetrators, which I think this is what's happening in our culture now. One thing that's happening in our culture is the demographics, the characteristics that can get you automatically lumped into the oppressor category are that collapse, that flattening of, oh, you're this, you're an oppressor. Unless you 100% ideologically align with what we are saying about said oppression. It's that stark. You are a bad guy. You are, for all practical intents and purposes, a fascist or a Nazi. You are the oppressor. You are the perpetrator. You are to be dismissed, condemned, hated, and rightfully so. Rightfully so. That is your proper role, because you are the enemy and you are the bad guy. And if you're not in one of those demographics, but you don't condemn them along with us, you too. You too. Maybe you're not the perpetrator, but you're a collaborator, which is just as heinous, just as disgusting, and you disgust us. We have contempt for you. That emotion is very powerful, that contempt, that hatred. And in my opinion, it often goes completely undiagnosed by the people who are having it. It's not seen as hate. It's seen as rightful anti-Nazi. You can punch a Nazi. You can commit violence against a Nazi. It's the right thing to do. It means you're one of the good guys. You can scream at them. You can just label them. You can condemn them. You can be disgusted by them and without feeling bad. In fact, you don't have to feel bad. You get to feel good, because that is the actual prime definition of a good guy. And there's a lot of this going on. The Overton window has moved on this, and I think it's accelerated, particularly in the last 5 years, and I think also right to say in the last 10 years. It's getting to a point that is, it's hard to not see it going somewhere real bad. And I don't know what percentage of people are being affected by this. It's not everybody. Well, everybody's affected, but that are getting really caught up and moved in that direction. Either like they're completely in that camp, or they're being significantly influenced by that movement. And I think with any movement, this is an ideology, it's a spirit, it's something in the air, it's something in the context that we're in. And it's right to ask, what's behind that? Where is it going? What will it do to me if I listen? If I'm not able to see it clearly and identify what it is, what's going to happen? How's this going to affect me? How is this going to affect how I look at people, how I treat people around me? And it's, you can think, hey, there's no impact if I'm just posting things online, but no, that has impact as well. But what is it going to do to my heart? What is it going to do to my mind and my soul? Is this, and where does this come from? There's a thought, I think a lot of people that are in this camp or significantly affected by it, they feel very, very confident. I mean, you can hear it, you can see it. They're very confident that it is right and proper to let these other groups have it, let these other people who don't agree with them ideologically just have it. They feel very right, very morally justified, very superior. Maybe even violence, justified. You can punch a Nazi. So that does not go to good places. Completely lost my train of thought. But, oh, yeah, I remember. The thing that I think a lot of people have the sense of, and I hope to unpack why I think this is wrong in a future video. I think the sense that people have is, well, of course that I'm right. I'm just aligning myself to the clearly unfolding progress towards what the future is, what a better future is, what the, wouldn't say it maybe, but utopia will be. The thing that we're all shooting for, progress. It's moving forward. It's better. It's the future. And so if I'm in line with that, which is clearly true and clearly revealed, and everybody should know it, then my beliefs aren't coming from somewhere. It's not like this is just obvious universal truth. And it's got the level of fervor and zeal as a religion. It has that level of fervor, that level of zeal, that level of sense of righteousness that goes with it. But it's not perceived as coming from anywhere. So it's a religion without origins. It's a religion without recognized doctrines and boundaries. It is a religion that gets to skirt by without being called religion or religious. And so it gets all the benefits in terms of zeal and a cause and feeling, like I'm on the right track and I'm one of the good guys. And it has none of the baggage that we moderns have associated with religion. So it gets kind of get off scot-free in that sense. And people can feel like I'm not religious, I'm just superior and on the right side of all these issues. So that's a dangerous combo. But make no mistake, it is religious. If not a religion, it's a quasi-religion because it has all the marks of that. And so that's not bad. I think you just have to be consistent and say, this worldview, this ideology is so explanatory, so all-encompassing, so such a strong place to stand in terms of the zeal and righteousness and that it produces in individuals, that it is functioning as a religion. It is the default new secular religion of our culture. And that's a big deal. That's a big deal. So I want to talk about where I think this comes from, not as an expert, and I'm not pretending to be, just trying to think and think out loud and think as clearly as I can and see as clearly as I can. Where does it come from? I do think it comes from somewhere. It has roots. It has philosophical underpinnings. It has founding fathers and founding mothers. And those are worth looking into. And then thinking like, well, where does this go? Where does it lead? What are the qualities of it? Is it healthy? What are the alternatives? Is there other ways of thinking that are demonstrably better or more keeping with reality? You know, this is not the way of this thinking is not, can't really claim like it's just clearly aligned with reality without defense, without explanation. I think in many cases that public dialogue, that argumentation that's actually convincing to people, is missing, and that's why many people are just happy to push back as hard as they feel like they need to push back, because they are clearly not convinced, and just maintaining an attitude of superiority and condemnation is not convincing people. So I think that's kind of where we're at right now. I think a big part of why things feel so tense and scary. It feels scary to talk about any of the related issues. But stick with me. I want to talk about this in ways that I think can be helpful. Again, not for clickbait, not for outrage, not for woe is anybody or any demographic, but for trying to think clearly, trying to see clearly, trying to work towards what's better for everybody, something that we can live out of and live with. So thanks for tuning in to this one, and join me for the next one.